Control the kitchen chaos and streamline your back-of-house operations with Restaurant Technologies. Restaurant Technologies' Total Oil Management Solution is the end-to-end automated oil management system that delivers, filters, monitors, and recycles your cooking oil, taking the dirtiest job out of the kitchen and lets your employees focus on more important tasks. The Total Oil Management Solution helps prevent the burns, spills, slips, and falls that come with traditional oil management. Restaurant Technologies gives you and your employees peace of mind among the chaos of a commercial kitchen and can maximize efficiency for your business. And no upfront cost. Learn more about Restaurant Technologies and all the solutions they offer by visiting rti-inc.com or call 888-796-4997.
Hi there, welcome to Menu Talk. I'm Pat Cobe, Senior Editor of Restaurant Business, and I'm here with
Bret Thorn, Senior Food and Beverage Editor of Nation's Restaurant News and Restaurant Hospitality.
Great to see you, Bret. We've had a lot of eating and drinking action this week, it seems. Yesterday, I had a chance to do the media preview of the Flavors of the U.S. Open, in which a lot of different restaurant chefs participate. It's at the tennis stadium in Queens, New York, where the U.S. Open is actually beginning next week. And as far as the chefs that were there was Ed Brown, David Burke, even Morimoto showed up, Alexandra Guarnaschelli, and they all contribute to the U.S. Open in some way. Some of them have restaurants there, some of them are in the food court. So it's really a nice event, and we got to taste some of the things ahead of time, including their signature cocktail, which is called the Deuce, and it has honeydew balls on top that look like tennis balls. So that's very famous, and people pay $21 for it, but they get a souvenir glass with it. So it's pretty good. It's made with vodka. Pretty good.
If you go into any midtown cocktail bar and they tell you a cocktail's $21, you say, "Oh, that's a good deal." Which I mean, just a few years ago, $16 was kind of the
Right.
standard, and it's so. And the U.S. Open is not known for being cheap, so
No.
And that is a beloved cocktail, and you get a souvenir.
Yeah. Well, one of the newbies at the U.S. Open this year, as far as food goes, is Coqodaq, which we talked about a few episodes ago. But they're doing their little fried chicken tenders with caviar on top. So that should be interesting. And it's actually the food service is run by Levy, but Levy partners with all these chefs. So it turns out to be a pretty nice event and a pretty good selection of food and drinks.
Yeah, I wanted to go, but I had other stuff to do. So I'm glad you went so that our audience can know what it's all about. And I've never had the Deuce, that cocktail. How is it?
It's actually called the Honey Deuce. I should have.
The Honey Deuce. Okay.
Yeah, so it has those honeydew balls on top.
Mhm.
It's made with vodka and chambord.
Yeah, the what is it? It's like a black raspberry liqueur.
Or currant, maybe. But anyway, it has that flavor profile.
Yeah.
And it's pretty neutral. It's not too sweet. It's something that I think is, it has wide appeal, I would say. But I guess people get it because of the souvenir glass, too.
Well, it's probably pretty with
It is very pretty.
Award and the little green melon balls floating in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So that's what I did yesterday. The Open starts next week, but they had this little preview ahead of time. So
yeah, that sounds great. And you know that Coqodaq, obviously fried chicken with caviar on top. So that high-low trend is not going away.
Mm-hmm.
And which is fine. Like, I don't have any problem with it. It's nice to kind of take things down to earth, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if that's really taking it down to earth if you put caviar on top, but caviar is actually really good with pedestrian things like French fries and potato chips and stuff.
One of the interesting things is a lot of the chefs prepared, like ceviches and tartars. And of course, Morimoto did his sushi, but there was a lot of raw or, citrus cooked fish, which seems to be, I guess because it's hot out, people like those, kind of cool dishes. So I guess people who attend the Open can expect some ceviche and tartare.
Well, the U.S. Open it's a fancy event and it's expensive to go.
Hmm.
I mean, I know some, pretty, not to get all classes, but some pretty blue collar people who like to go to the U.S. Open and who invest in going and they really enjoy it. So even though it's pricey, it's a sort of like all of New York, a melting pot kind of event. A lot of people.
Definitely, yeah. And so, did you explore your neighborhood a little more this week?
I did. I went to a little fast casual Georgian restaurant, and in my neighborhood, Georgian refers to the former Soviet Republic of Georgia, which has a cuisine that is starting to get people's attention. Not a huge amount, but the charismatic sort of poster child of Georgian cuisine is khachapuri, which is like a cheese boat or a bread boat with cheese in it and usually an egg. And that, I have come to learn, is just one kind of khachapuri that you can have.
Mhm.
That is called the ajaruli khachapuri. But I went to Georgian Star, this restaurant in my neighborhood, and had the imaruli khachapuri, which is sort of like just a cheese stuffed crust. So
Mm.
sort of a flatbread with kind of a salty feta-like cheese, not quite as sharp as feta, but I'm not sure what cheese it was. And they speak very limited English at this place. I've tried to have conversations, and I realized, oh, you just know how to take orders and make basic polite conversation like it's delicious. So not great for interviewing anybody, but good for sort of a passive anthropology. But there's also all these bottled jars of things and pre-made salads, and the bottles and jars are imported from Georgia. And I was intrigued by a bottled mulberry sauce that I
Hmm.
will eventually buy and figure out what to pour it on. But I don't think I've ever had a mulberry, and I certainly don't know what. Is it a sweet sauce? Is it a savory sauce? I don't know. Most of the writing is in Georgian, which I
Well, I'm
cannot.
very impressed that you could actually pronounce all these things that you tasted.
Oh, maybe I'm doing it wrong, but I'm doing my best. And then I also went to a steakhouse called Hawksmoor, where they have, we talked about this last week, I think. They
Hmm.
have the notorious BEEF, which is their version of a Big Mac. And it has dry aged smashed beef patties. And other than that, it's special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. The cheese is Velveeta,
Really?
which,
Wow.
yeah, which adds a creaminess. Obviously, that's what Velveeta does best: is melt and be creamy and stay consistent. And with fries and a drink called a ginger brew, which is sort of a very gingery beverage served in a frosted mug. That altogether is $45, which is a lot. But it's it's a steakhouse, so
Hmm.
steakhouses get to charge that, and it's how I wish Big Macs tasted and how I kind of imagine Big Macs to taste. It has that comforty, yummy, creamy, special saucy feel with the pickles and the onions. And often, I'm sorry, McDonald's, when I go to McDonald's, the Big Mac it's okay. It doesn't fully uh, evoke the memories of me eating it as a youth. And maybe I don't know why. But
Right.
this notorious BEEF, it is a similar experience to a Big Mac, larger, more robust, but still, you know, thinly sliced smashed patties
Hmm.
with all of those fixings that I don't need to say again because I actually checked with my millennial colleagues to know if they know the jingle about two all beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, sesame seed bomb. And some of them did and some of them didn't. But anybody beyond millennial years will
for sure.
instinctively know that.
Well, I think a lot of the quick service chains are now tapping into nostalgia because Taco Bell just brought back like items from the 60s, which millennials and Gen Zers have no idea about. They've
Right.
never tasted them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, one of them dated back to 1962,
mhm.
which is 5 years before I was born. So, yeah, I think as we've discussed before, it's not really nostalgia. It's more like pining away for bygone days.
Mhm.
And that brings to mind almond milk, which is of course super duper trendy now. Not as trendy as oat milk, but still all over the place. And the first time I read about almond milk was actually in a food history book that sort of traced food over the years. And apparently, wealthy Europeans in the Middle Ages drank a lot of almond milk too.
Oh, really? Wow.
So that's talk about nostalgia. I'm not nostalgic for the European Middle Ages; they were horrible. And I don't really love almond milk, so maybe that's not a thing for my.
Well, it was probably easier to preserve. I mean, they probably had a lot of almond trees, and it made sense that they would make milk out of some of the almonds.
Process them.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, they had no refrigeration, so I don't know what they did.
Yeah.
But if any historians are listening to this podcast, any food historians, let us know. Right in.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I also had a chance to revisit Market 57, which is the new food. Well, it's not so new anymore, but the newish food hall on Pier 57 in Manhattan.
Mhm.
And one of the newcomers there is Sahadi, which is a Middle Eastern store in Brooklyn that's been there since 1948, I found out. So it's a fixture there. It was it was back when people didn't even know what Middle Eastern food really was, but it was there if you wanted to buy pita breads or hummus or tahini. And a lot of, people became acquainted with Middle Eastern food through Sahadi. But now they're actually making food to go. So they do all these different flatbreads, and they had one of their spinach pies there. They had a lot of the dips, hummus and tahini and shug, which is kind of an Israeli preparation that's a little spicy. Shug, maybe you know how to pronounce it better, but Skog. But anyway, we had a chance to taste all of the different items that they have, as well as have 4 different Lebanese wines, which were really interesting because Lebanon has a coastline that's all along the Mediterranean Sea. Plus, they have a mountain range in the middle of the country. So they have on the other side of that mountain range, I learned, is where the wine growing valley is. And it's the perfect place to grow wine grapes. So we're not that familiar with Lebanese wines in the US, but they were really good. They had, a couple of whites and a red. One of the reds they actually had 2 reds. One was very light, more like a Pinot Noir, and the other was kind of tannic, but the whites were very light, and they even had a sparkling white. So there are a lot of possibilities with Lebanese wines.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, I've had a little bit of Lebanese wine, and it's and there's also Israeli wine right across the border. There's a lot of potential there. Of course, that's an ancient region for many things, including wine. People believe that Georgia was where wine originated. I don't know. I kind of have a feeling that people, anywhere where there were grapes, people learned to ferment them. But Georgia's not that far away. So on the other side of the sea. So it's all, sure, why wouldn't the wine be good there?
No, definitely. But I just think, they're not exported as much as, wines from other countries. So I think it's kind of something that Americans should become more familiar with.
Yeah, and they're certainly available at fancy Middle Eastern restaurants here in New York City. I don't know if they're readily available that many other places. But
Well, Sahadi actually also has a wine store, which I found out. It's in Industry City in Brooklyn, which is kind of a neighborhood that's being developed with a lot of food and drink places, as well as small manufacturers. So, yeah, I'll have to take a visit there.
oh, there's even a sake brewery in Industry City.
Oh, cool.
Yes, sake, Brooklyn Kura, it's called. Kura is a sake brewery, so it's called
Hmm.
Brooklyn Kura, which is a very accurate, apropos name. And Industry City's fun, and you
Yeah,
can just hop on the N train or the R train and go
right.
right down there. I mean, it's a long way from your neck of the woods.
Well, I have been there once, but I think I need another field trip.
Yeah, it's a cool place. It's far from my neck of the woods too, because as we discussed, Brooklyn is huge, and I'm on a different train line.
Right.
Far.
Well, speaking of field trips, I actually had a podcast this week with JJ Johnson, who's the founder of Field Trip, which is a fast casual bowl concept. But his bowls have really different kinds of ingredients in them than some of the other bowl concepts. He has a background that's, from it's partly Caribbean, partly African. He's from an immigrant family, and he talked a little bit about his family and the food legacy that he gained through eating around the table with his family.
When I look back as an adult or professional in families of immigrants or families that want to know more about each other or stay very close together, food is like a very big sector of that. The table is prominent. And, my family moved from New York City to Pennsylvania to Poconos, and there weren't places we would go out to eat. We would go eat out at my grandparents' house. And that was a table. That was the restaurant. The food was delicious. It was dynamic. The music was loud. It was a very fun atmosphere.
Yeah, so he didn't really eat out a lot at restaurants when he was a kid, but he learned a lot about food around his grandparents' table.
That immediately evoked an image of me and my family eating at my grandmother's apartment every Friday night. We went with our cousins and had a sort of traditional Eastern European Jewish meal. And I don't think it ever would have occurred to us to go out for Eastern European Jewish food, even if such restaurants existed, which they definitely did not. But in Denver in the 70s. But those were wonderful memories.
Yeah, I mean, I have the same memories. My grandparents lived in the Bronx, and all the cousins were crammed into this table. And once you were in, you can never get out. So you just sit there for the duration of the meal. So we did get to appreciate that food.
Did you have heated conversations about all things in the way that
Well,
Eastern
my
European?
grandparents, my grandfather really didn't speak English at all. My grandmother did, but so we didn't have many heated conversations, or else I didn't understand them. So
Yeah,
perhaps they were having heated conversations that I couldn't figure out.
would they have been in Yiddish?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, none of my grandparents, as I understand it, all understood Yiddish, but they never spoke it. They were all born in the United States.
Oh, yeah. My grandparents were not born in the U.S., so that's the difference. But
That's the difference. Anyway, back to J.J. Johnson.
yeah, so JJ, he also talked about opening Field Trip, which is, as I mentioned, is his fast casual restaurant. There are now 3 locations, and he will probably open more, but he doesn't have anything in the works right now. I mean, he opened the first one, I believe, before the pandemic, so his growth has been, slow and steady. But he's also, I mean, he's a TV chef, and he's also written cookbooks, and he's running around to Martha's Vineyard to do, festivals, and he's a very active chef. So maybe that's why he hasn't opened more. But
And are all of his restaurants in New York City? I think they
well,
are.
he just opened one in the Atlantis, which he's going to talk about, which is
Oh,
in Nassau, the Bahamas.
talk about a big milestone, opening Field Trip as our first international location at the Atlantis in the Bahamas. My first big licensee deal with the, $1 billion food and beverage place, hotel. And that for me was a dream come true, working with the Atlantis team, building Field Trip, a prototype there, and then watching it as we opened it getting received really well by people. Because I'm also a person like, I don't know if anybody's ever going to show up, right? Like, this is not like we're taking reservations. We just open the doors every day and hope people walk through.
Right.
And then, yes, getting tapped to cook in the vineyard, which is, a very, very energetic place in August. Not a place that I went to as a kid or knew about, right? Very, very ingrained in Black culture. I think really got energized when President Barack Obama bought a house there.
Yeah.
Made many people go to. But yeah, I'm excited. This is my second year cooking there. Cooking for an event with Time Magazine, which is like this very secretive dinner they do with very like high, powerful people. Last year, Attorney General Eric Holder was a speaker. And I get to cook my food my way, which is really great in a room like that, which most people know me for, right? Most people know me from a fine dining, fine casual dining perspective. That's my career. Fast casual is just something I've been so-called figured out because I never came from the fast food sector.
Right.
And it's been working out for me so far.
Yeah, so it's interesting. He did work as a fine dining chef for probably 10 years before he opened Field Trip. So he also talked a little bit about how he translates that experience, but he's all over the place.
He sure is, and it's I think of Martha's Vineyard as super duper lily white. So I've been to Martha's Vineyard. I have a friend whose family used to have a house there, and I didn't know there was much diversity there. So that's nice.
Yeah. Well, there's a legacy of Black families, middle-class Black families, and going there and buying homes and they have a community that is, kind of, I would say at the beginning it was kind of separate, but maybe now it's more integrated into the whole island. But it was a destination for middle-class Black families once they made it and they wanted a beach house. So
makes sense. It's a lovely
nice.
island.
Yeah. He also talked about how he's, translating that fine dining background into the fast casual Field Trip.
I work really hard for the guys that own the Cecil, and I used to say if I worked that hard for them, I wonder what that would equal for me. And I felt like the uptown community never had consciously better food for them at an affordable rate, right? It was either like you had to go eat out, spend a ton of money, or you had to go eat fried chicken, McDonald's type of approach, fried fish. Well, what about the folks that were looking for better for you food? And yes, downtown has that, right? You can walk around Midtown or West Village, and there's so much of that. But at this point, there was none of that, uptown above 110th Street. So that was a goal, is like to empower the community around better for you food that you can consciously eat better at an affordable rate. And originally I didn't want to open fast casual. I wanted to make it, a casual dining space that was based around rice that you would order from the bar. There'd be a really cool cocktail program, but I couldn't raise enough money to do that. So I took what I did and I said, okay, what about if I dummy this down and people eat out of paper plates? What does that look like? And kind of develop the kitchen, but the kitchen is very much a chef-driven, open kitchen, drawers opening, plating in front of you. I don't think that, I know people like it, but I don't think it's the best thing from like your staff. It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, so it's interesting how his first location was up in Harlem, so there wasn't anything like that up there at the time. And I mean, they have a lot of fast food, and that's the place you had to go if you wanted Popeyes at one time, because Popeyes was only in Harlem. but now it's all over Manhattan.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's, he really does infuse the menu with, really great ingredients. The rice he gets is from farmers in North Carolina. So he's just really into fine ingredients, but he keeps the price affordable, which is really admirable.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the Cecil was a fine dining, I think kind of a steakhouse kind of place in Harlem on 118th Street. I didn't know that off the top of my head. I just looked up where it was.
Oh,
I knew it was Harlem, but 118th Street,
uh-huh.
owned by Alexander Smalls, who is a prominent black chef and restaurateur in New York City, and a cool guy. But yeah, that J.J. Johnson was not working for himself back then.
No. So I think he's going to talk about the rice now and what he puts in these rice bowls. So let me play that clip.
A lot of those folks want to eat something better, so they might spend their last $20 with us that week to get something better. And then we've been able, through the pandemic, we were able to branch off and expand because of what we do in the community and going into other communities as Rockefeller Center. And if you look at our pricing in Rockefeller Center across the board, we're cheaper than everybody else in there, not because we want to be, it's because we should be, right? The MTA worker, the construction guy, the teacher, somebody walking through that works in the office but isn't a hedge fund or private equity folk, they need a place to eat. They need somewhere that's delicious. So we keep our prices as moderate as we can to really impact the neighborhoods. And that's really what Field Trip stands for, is impacting communities one grain at a time.
Have you eaten at Field Trip, Bret?
I have not eaten at Field Trip, but I have been to other bowl concepts, and I think you can construct a full meal there.
Mm-hmm.
But my issue with a lot of bowl concepts is that the food is fine, and it kind of tastes like it was put together by a committee. And, the flavors don't really come together in a wonderful, harmonious way. It's lunch, and it's, reasonably nutritious and tastes okay, which I don't think is how anybody should ever have any meal. Like, everything should be, anytime you eat, it should be joyous.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I usually order the chef curated bowls, because if you put them together yourself, you can make a lot of mistakes, even though we come from like a food culinary world. I don't always put the best things together when you're going down the line, because you're pressured to tell them what you want, and it sometimes comes out a mess.
Yeah.
So that's why, the chef curated bowls are really the best deal. And I think Field Trip has mostly chef curated bowls, so he puts them together. He has a lot of sauces that he does. I also wanted him to talk a little bit about his cookbooks, because that's really interesting. He's won several awards for his cookbooks.
September of last year, I released The Simple Art of Rice, which was a New York Times best cookbook of the year, which was really amazing. It gives you everything about how to cook rice, from the simple pot of rice to celebrations to breakfast to all the great things. I worked on that book for 3 years through the pandemic.
Wow.
And very, I don't know, that's going to be a hard book for me to beat out in my career. And before that, I was a co-author of a book called Between Harlem and Heaven, Afro-Asian American Cooking, with Alexander Smalls and Veronica Chambers. That book won a James Beard Award. I think that was the first book. I don't call it the first book, but I think what we did at the Cecil and what that book represents is really what you're seeing in food today, of people feeling comfortable cooking from their diaspora, right? It's okay to say, I'm from here and this is what my food is, and let me cook this. And I'm seeing more and more of that. And I believe that's what the impact the Cecil did for the culinary scene, and then what Between Harlem and Heaven has done. And that book is still on the shelf, still selling, which is just really great to see. So, those are my 2 books, and hopefully many more to come.
What he says is true, because immigrant food is like so celebrated now, but a few years ago, even before the pandemic, maybe it wasn't something that people really celebrated.
Well, for so many years, fine dining was French, and that was it. And eventually, some Italian restaurants came to be regarded as fine dining. But I think it was only like 15 years ago that Del Posto was the first Italian restaurant to get a New York Times 4-star review. And it's really pretty recent, especially considering how much great Italian food there is here in New York City, and that it's a totally mainstream cuisine, but still French food dominated. And I think it was Ruth Reichel in the late 90s who gave 3 stars to the first Japanese restaurant.
Right.
And now
she was the first one who started reviewing, restaurants that weren't headed by French chefs, or, so it is interesting. She really went into like some of the neighborhood restaurants and started reviewing more of the ethnic chefs.
When she also kind of pulled back the curtain on what it's like to be a critic, or what it's like to be a special person compared to a regular person. She did a famous, legendary review of Le Cirque, in which they recognized her once and another time they didn't recognize her. And the service was very, very different. And the way she was treated was very different. And, that kind of thing, I don't want to be reminded of, that I wasn't popular in junior high and people were mean and excluded me. And I certainly don't want to be treated that way in a restaurant. And there were, I don't think they're around anymore, but there were some restaurants that were like that. And why would I want them to have my money?
No, exactly. Well, this is the last clip from our podcast where JJ talks about what's next and where he might take Field Trip.
Field Trip is a brand that is starting to look like a place for people in the middle, right? This is a place that everyday folks want to eat at, bring their families, soccer moms, and I feel like we need to find those communities and go into those communities. But we're such a young brand. We've only been around 5 years, and I want to take it slow and steady to go to the right places or do the right things. So yeah, I think more field trips to come, more staff to come to potentially groom and push Field Trip more. And I think just more opportunities in the world to try to conquer.
Something to look forward to. I didn't realize Field Trip was only 5 years old.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing he said is that he doesn't feel like the city has really come back since the pandemic. And so he's looking at suburban locations now, which a lot of fast casuals have been doing, like Sweet Green and Shake Shack are all moving into the suburbs because there isn't that huge lunch crowd. Maybe they're there Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, but the other 2 days and over the weekends, it's kind of dead. So,
yeah, that's certainly the reports that I'm getting from fast casual operators in Midtown Manhattan, which just used to have insane foot traffic. And they say that, as you said, the middle of the week is back, but very few people go into the office 5 days a week anymore. And, we spend our money in our own neighborhoods.
Right. I mean, the tourists have really been here this summer, but I went to the Field Trip in Rockefeller Center, and it was really busy there because tourists go to Rockefeller Center and then they go down into that area where all the different fast casuals are. So, but anyway, I guess he wants to go into the suburbs or maybe more Caribbean islands like the Bahamas.
That would make sense. I mean, that's where that's the origins of a lot of his food. But I doubt they have that kind of, fast casual bowl concept, which, even though I just disparaged it, when done well, it's a pleasant experience. Yeah.
Well, so what do you have planned for the weekend?
I don't know. I'll probably go back to my old neighborhood of Park Slope and hang out in my bar, Logan's Run, and go to my gym. I haven't lifted weights since, I think, Monday. So it's been a lazy week, although I've been getting my steps in.
Good.
And in terms of food, I don't know what's on my schedule. I think I might be getting a new wing sauce delivered to me from a casual dining chain. I mean, I'll let you know. I'll try it and we'll find out. And I'm sure there are other eating experiences on my docket. I just don't remember.
I'm sure there are. You never go hungry.
No, that's for sure.
Well, I was sent to Giordano's pizzas, and they're in my freezer. But I noticed that at the Democratic convention, they sent some over there too, because it was in Chicago, and everybody knows that Giordano's is like an iconic deep dish pizza. So I did a little story about Giordano's, so they sent me these pizzas, but they are huge. I have to have some company in order to break them out.
Or refreeze them, although you probably want
Well, they're frozen now. They're in my freezer. But,
right, and you don't want to thaw it and refreeze them often. It's not ideal. Well, we'll find out all about this, and we'll have a new guest next week.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Control the kitchen chaos and streamline your back of house operations with Restaurant Technologies. Restaurant Technologies' total oil management solution is the end-to-end automated oil management system that delivers, filters, monitors, and recycles your cooking oil, taking the dirtiest job out of the kitchen and lets your employees focus on more important tasks. The total oil management solution helps prevent the burns, spills, slips, and falls that come with traditional oil management. Restaurant Technologies gives you and your employees peace of mind among the chaos of a commercial kitchen and can maximize efficiency for your business. And no upfront cost. Learn more about Restaurant Technologies and all the solutions they offer by visiting rti-inc.com or call 888-796-4997.